Hello, everybody. This is Dwayne Newstater. I want to welcome you to another episode of Tree Actions, the Human Forestry podcast, where people of the trees talk about their experiences growing up, working in the human forest. Tree people talking about tree things. And joining us today, and it's a bit of a unique show because I'm on the road. There's a conference coming up, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I'm on location here with a fellow that's no stranger to the tree care industry. And today I want to welcome to the show John Ransom. Hey, John.
Hey, Dwayne. Tony.
Good. Well, it's afternoon. Good afternoon. All good. Yeah, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, and I'll just add, like, Johnny we're on location here at John's house. I'm in one room, John's in another room, and he has a couple of wonderful canines, and they do get a little barky at times. So if any hear dogs in the background, it's that'd be an interesting topic. But I find a lot of arborists, people in the tree industry, are dog people and cat people, and have pets. So if you hear some dogs barking, well, that's just Oakley and what's her Ivy? Oakley and Ivy. John's dogs. So, John, we always ask people a little bit about how it all got started, and how did you find your way into the human forest?
Well, I would have to say right from birth, because I come from a little town in Vineland Station, which third generation fruit farming area. We had about 50 acres of peaches, pears, cherries, sweet cherries, sour cherries. So when you look back at it, I can see where I was connected kind of at a very young age, and as it related to trees, because that was our summer jobs every year, was working on the farm and taking care of trees.
Really interesting, and how did that, like, what's your first kind of memory as a kid of, like, when you, like, was it like kind of, oh crap, I got to work in the trees, or did you find
right from the start
trees? Oh, right from the start.
I hated pruning them, especially the peach trees, because they're such a size that you would end up having to walk around the tree quite frequently, and you're doing, I don't know, 100 to 200 trees in a day. I get so dizzy by the end of the day. It was crazy. So my mother would always say, well, just walk the opposite way around the other tree. I'm like, it doesn't work that way, Mother. It never did. But one of the things I do remember from my childhood, my brothers and sisters would always play jokes on me. So we'd use extension ladders and things like that to reach some of the taller cherry trees. And our first job was picking cherries. So that was first spring job there was on the farm. And they would always steal the ladder out from underneath me. So I'd always have to figure out a way to get down. So that's kind of really, I would say, the first type of climbing that I would have done when it came to trees and in trees. I distinctly remember riding a tree down or a branch down one time in the cherry orchard because I was out too far on the limb and the whole tree just kind of fell over. There were older cherry trees in the orchard, but it scared the hell out of me, and I just kind of rode it down and jumped off when it hit the ground. I thought it was kind of cool. So, but I always swore I'd never be a farmer. But I ended up working with trees and went to school for trees. I actually went to school my goal was to be a conservation officer. And I ended up getting connected into forestry, which led me into arboriculture at the end of the day.
Wow. So I've known you a long time, and we've never taken the time, or I don't remember talking specifically about the orchard experiences like that. So I guess you had an interesting, or a lesson in tree stability
Yeah, you could say that.
risk assessment already, going all the way back.
Right.
So you talked about getting into going to school and so on, and forestry being a part of conservation. How did you end up actually
once I finished my 2 years at Sir Sanford Fleming College for forestry, I could decide to go back for a third year and get my and work through that. Or there was another option, and you always saw these individuals walking around campus. They had a rope over their shoulder, they had these harnesses, and they were walking back and forth from their dorms and stuff like that. And I was always kind of interested, like, what are you guys doing? Like, ended up stopping and talking to one of the guys, and they're like, oh, we're in the arboriculture program. I'm like, what is that? And they're like, oh, we're climbing trees and stuff. And at that point, I wasn't about to go work in a logging camp for 2 months, 3 months with a bunch of stinky old men. So I thought, hey, this is another option to be able to look at and work in more of the municipality settings or the urban areas and still work with trees, which I like to do. The urban forestry program was working at the same time, so you'd always see these guys walking around with ropes and harnesses down the streets. Like, it was just an odd kind of look. and I ended up talking to one of them to find out what it was and all about. So then once I figured out what it was, I went back to school again to get the urban tree maintenance program that they offered.
Okay. And that was that. And then how long before you worked then?
In the arborist?
Like at a company?
I took the urban tree in 96, so I started working in the summer of 96. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And often here we've been starting to ask people about the equipment. And we've had quite a few people that have been involved with climbing on the show so far. And what was what was hot, and where was the industry at in the development of the climbing systems, the harnesses?
The climbing systems were
and all that stuff.
Pretty standard for that time. It was just a dynamic system. You either had the taut line to choose from or the Blake hitch. The Blake hitch was kind of like the new knot at the time. And then we had most of the harnesses, you had your lanyard, you had your work positioning, and you had your harness, and it was pretty straightforward. That was as simple as it was.
So your first memory of working climbing, what sticks out for you as a
I would say
standpoint?
The group of individuals that I was working with when I first started, there was a number of them that, it really helped me along in my career and kind of started to lead me down the path of arboriculture. And I've always tried through my entire career trying to take pieces of each person I touch or each person that's touched me when it comes to the tree care industry and making it my own or adding it to my repertoire of whatever I'm doing at that time. So I guess the person that I would say really affected my life would probably be one of my teachers, just getting done my arborist program at Sir Sanford Fleming in Lindsay. A guy by the name of Jim Deach. At the time, this is the end of the program. We've had like a employer day where employers came out and watched me climb. And at that point in time, I still didn't have a job yet. And he's like, how can you not have a job yet? I'm like, well, I already have a job to go back to. It was driving trucks and for the farming industry and dropping off chemicals to the farmers to be able to spray their crops. And he's like, how do you not have a job yet? I'm like, well, nobody really seemed interested in me. I was kind of shy back then a little bit as well, too. I'm a little farm kid from little town. You don't have much interactions with different people or have that ability to interact with people. So he's like, here, he gave me a name and a location. And he said, on your way home, you're going to drive right past this place, stop in, talk to the guy there. I'm going to give him a call, let him know you're coming. So when that happened, I thought, what the heck? I'm not going to hurt or lose anything by going to talk to this guy. So on my way home, I just pulled into this long laneway, kind of snuck back in between some houses and some trees and knocked on the door, and he was my first employer. And that was Maple Hill Tree Service. It was kind of interesting because at the time, and again, it's something that's helped mold me, I would say, from the talking with him at the beginning. And there was an opening. When I mean there was an opening, the reason there was an opening was because he had a fatality that happened. So they were going through a whole process of that happening, and right. I was coming in kind of a weird situation. But you know what? It was one of the best choices. One of my first best choices that I made in my life to be able to kind of stick with it and go down this path of arboriculture.
Wow. So you like right from the hop, you were introduced to the side.
That was in 96.
That we
96.
We came to learn much more about. What year
so
was that? That was 96, you said?
So it was, and you know what?
It was in
things like that affect you, right? Like,
yeah.
And I knew when I started climbing, because of how physical it was, that I didn't want to climb for my entire life. I wanted to do something a little bit more. But I needed the climbing aspect to get me to where I wanted to go, or kind of my aspirations of what I wanted to do. And training was kind of those aspects back when I first started. And it was really that kind of kicked me off to the fact that, you know what, if I can learn stuff and I can show people how they're showing me or teaching me, and I can take that to different people, then I've done some good throughout my career. And that was kind of like the early starts of it.
Yeah. Wow. Because it was, I don't think we've yet talked about it with anyone on the podcast, but, when a close colleague and friend, Peter Donzelli, was killed in a tree accident in upstate New York, that was in 2000. And, you were involved with training at that point, I think, but, that was really, really put the whole significance on the map of the kind of fatalities that are occurring in the arborist industry, and actually still are. But, you were able to experience that, unfortunately, but yet it also
absolutely
was a benefit to you. Cause
I remember being at
that it's dangerous.
Kim Palmer's place in Connecticut, and we actually had the samples of Pete's tree, and we were looking at it, trying to figure out kind of where things broke and where the type of wood that he was working on and the lightning strike that came down. And it was pretty neat to be able to analytically kind of go through that process and kind of as a group. Like it was me, you, Ken, and there was only one or two other people there because I think we were out going to do another course somewhere else when we were with Arbor Master. So
yeah.
So it was kind of, it was a friend in the industry, and Pete, I always remember Pete at the bottom of the work climb before I went to ascend up into the tree, and it just, he was just that guy there, right? That's the face that I remember at the bottom of the tree when climbing the internationals. It's like, here you go, here's your setup, away you go, and away you go. So it was hard to go through that a little bit. Then it reflects back to some of the moments in your life before that, right? So, sorry, we're getting a little deep here.
Yeah, for sure. No, no, it's all good. That's I think it's important, and it kind of got me thinking about the competition because I mean that's certainly been a passion of yours for a
Well
long
over 10
time, right?
years.
You competed
Let's
for well over 10
see.
years, I think, didn't
I would
you?
have to say I was probably still competing. The last time I won was in 2011. So yeah, 15 years I was still competing. I enjoyed competing. I love competing. It was something that I strive for because I knew that it would be able to connect me with different people and to be able to take a different path outside of climbing or production climbing at that time. So I started training and competing. My first competition was 2007. I didn't compete in 2006. My first one was in 2007. I placed second in the Ontario chapter. And then I won in 98. That's when I first went to the internationals. And it was the first time I actually met you. No,
So
97 was my
97 was
first
your
one.
first one.
Yeah.
97 was your first one, not 2007.
And then we met, I won in 98, which was my first one
Okay, yeah.
that I won in Ontario. And we were in Birmingham, England. And I met you and a bunch of the Canadians. I didn't really know you that well, but it was like Danny LeBlanc took me
Wow.
around and he kind of like showed me who was who in the playground and kind of worked through it. And it
Yeah.
was an amazing experience from that. But even from there, it was when I won in 98, the Quebec chapter was looking for different things, and the Atlantic chapter was trying to get people to come out to the climbing competitions. And they asked one time, like, anybody interested in going out east to compete in their climbing competition? I'm like, yeah, anything that gets me more experience, more exposed, the more times I do it, the better I'm going to get at it. And I ended up going out there, and they used me as a marketing tool to say, hey, if we can get guys from Ontario to come all the way out here to compete, why can't you compete locally? So it was pretty neat, and they used me in a good way when it came to, and it was the competition that we had there. It was in St. John's, and it was the best attended conference tree climbing competition they had in all their history, and part of it was because they were using me as a marketing tool. And then I just ended up competing all across. I got a name. They said, hey, this John Ransom guy, it's like, he's like a super guy. And I ended up competing in Quebec chapter. I ended up going back in the Atlantic chapter a couple more times. I always competed every year in the Ontario chapter. I went out west to compete in the BC Open and out in the prairies. And the prairies is really the first time that I met you a little bit more down the road. And you invited me out to, we're climbing back in a bush. I can't remember where it is. It was back in some farmer's bush. Ken Palmer was there. He was coming out to help and support because you and him had a training course that was going on outside of there over the next few days. And you were like, oh, if you're going to be sticking around for a little while, you know what, why don't you come check this out? And that was when I kind of started getting involved with the training aspect of it.
Wow. Yeah, that was been one of the first Harbor Master series we did in the West. And so, we always ask people, it seems like a lot of the people that we've been having on the show so far do also have not only part of the human forest as a career as a climber or otherwise, but also in education in trees and teaching people about trees. So when do you feel that really started for you as far as your journey to the stage, so to speak?
Well, I think I would have to say the first aspect would have been showing up at that farmer's field that you gave me an address to see what you and Ken were doing. Really, that was the first touch of seeing it in a group, seeing somebody do instructional aspects of tree work. Yeah, we had Humber College and stuff at home, but I wasn't involved in that until a little bit later on, where they have an apprenticeship program and an arborist program. So I guess the first time would have been out in that field, dropping poplars and taking that course.
Yep.
Just kind of hanging out, seeing what was going on.
Right.
How did it evolve for me?
And then how did it evolve for you?
Well, I think it was you, Norm, and Ken Palmer. And then we kind of talked and we did some stuff, and you were coming out to Ontario to do some stuff, and we started just connecting more and more. And the next year, the climbing competitions connected again, and it just through the climbing competitions and through just meeting up with each other. Because if I wasn't competing in the internationals, I was there helping a lot of the time, so I would still connect with the same people that were always in that kind of realm or that group of people. So it was, and the climbing competitions, you just learn so much. It was amazing. But to learn from you and Ken and Rip and Norm St. Jean, it was just like that. That was where a lot of my training started, was with those three and Norm as well. And when we were working a lot more in Canada, so it was really just you and Norm that were doing a lot of stuff in Canada, and that's where I would start to hook up and come out and, you know what, help out or do whatever was needed, carry bags, whatever. I was a bag man. I didn't do that at all, because you know what, I had a conversation with Andrew Hordick one time.
Yeah,
we were getting on a plane. We were going to do a training seminar out in Winnipeg. And we were both kind of pretty new at it, and we were both pretty eager to learn. And we were sitting on the plane together. He's like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know if we should do this." I'm like, "You know what, man? If anything, you've saved one person already." And I said, "That's yourself, because you're willing to go and learn something new, or learn to try to learn something above and beyond what you already learned." So, if anything, you've already saved one person, and hopefully we'll save a bunch more people down the road when it comes to working in trees and spreading that knowledge and providing them with choices.
Wow.
A lot of the companies and a lot of the people didn't have choices to be able to learn from, right? And us traveling around and being able to do that and bring things back, I think was, to me anyways, that was, to be able to do that and be that vessel to be able to do that. You know what? I'll take that all day long. Yeah.
You know, I know one part of your journey took you overseas all the way to Singapore. How that, from that time on that plane with Andrew?
Well, I think I
Singapore, like
everybody else was busy, and I said yes. But yeah, that was. You know what? There's a couple times in my life where I've got things that I truly remember and people I truly care about and worked with. And Singapore was one of those trips. It was just like, it was an amazing trip. I got to, and again, this was pretty young in my career, and it was with Arbor Master, and I got to go with Rip Tompkin out to Singapore to train the Singapore government people how to climb trees. It's pretty neat. And to go somewhere, like I said before, a little farm boy out of this little town of 500 people, to be flying across the oceans and go over to Singapore to be able to do something like this, I was in awe, especially with Rip. I watched Rip climb before I even started climbing, and saw him in Salt Lake City, Utah, and I was just like, man, that's a pretty cool dude. And next thing I know, a few years later, I'm hanging out on a plane with him in Singapore. Now, it wasn't always roses, I'll tell you that much, in Singapore. And if you ever get the chance to talk to Rip, ask him about the ants. The ants are nasty there, man. Like, they're big ants. They fall out of the tree, and they're climbing up and down the tree. We're sitting there watching, and you're standing there doing instruction, all of a sudden, a couple of them fall out of the tree right in the back of your neck and bite you. It's like, ow, ow, oh. You always, one of us would be, and everybody there that we're teaching, they just start laughing. But The ants were pretty. Yeah, you knew a lot about the ants when you stood there. Even climbing, like you had to watch where you're putting your hands, and Rip wasn't at the stage yet where he'd let me do instructions up in the tree, so he ended up doing them all. I was more for ground support, and he was. I watched him a few times grin and bear it. And he stuck his hand up into a branch union, and there it was just full of ants biting him.
That's great.
Johnny, you talked a couple times about being the shy farm boy. For people that might listen to this that wonder how they could ever, get to such a place, like to be able to travel and train, like, are the opportunities still out there for people that want it? Is it still
absolutely.
like,
There's all kinds of avenues
that said, hey man, how can I get to do
and ways
like
to be able to get there. Just the way I took was a little bit out of the norm because it was through the climbing competitions. When I started climbing, I realized that I had a pretty nice skill set with only doing a very short period of time. So it was, I saw an avenue to be able to, get on to the podiums and get me recognized to be able to do those types of things. And it got me recognized. But in kind of a bad way when you look at it at first. And what I mean by that is I was only in the industry for 2 years before I won my first competition in Ontario. And I talk about this in some of the training and stuff that I used to do. It was like they put me on a pedestal because I won a climbing competition. It's like, oh, you're the best in Ontario. It's like, yeah, but I don't know anything really. And so I either had to fake it or I had to learn more to be able to know what I was talking about and actually get respected through the climbing competitions and people that I talked to. So I decided to find people that were like-minded like myself and to be able to really just kind of connect with them and be able to learn those types of things. And that's definitely where you came into play, like as a mentor and one of my best friends.
Well, thanks, Johnny. and likewise. We were in your office earlier today, and I was looking at some of your medals. And, I was at that call, but I don't remember the details. Like you placed third in the work climb in Pittsburgh, correct?
Well, it was an interesting day.
Now, tell everybody what you told me about that day.
I was never a bride. I was always kind of a bridesmaid, I guess you could kind of say. I was always just out of the top 5. I was just on the cusp. But that day was one of my most proudest days for myself as an individual with the work climb. I believe it was a big sycamore or a London plane. I think it was a sycamore. I was the first one to go. I dropped first. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? Like, seriously, first international work climb? I'm like, okay. So I got up to the top of the tree, and the one thing I said, you got nothing to lose, dude. Just go as fast as you can and as smooth as you can. And I ended up setting the time for the day. And my time stood all day long until the last 2 competitors. Of course, Mark Chisholm and Beth Strausser. So I ended up placing third. And for those of you who don't know them, they are amazing individuals and they're amazing climbers. Definitely people that I looked up to throughout my climbing careers, and being able to talk with them and climb with them, it was pretty amazing.
So, Johnny, I remember, like, as a climber and even as an instructor, like you were solid, and you weren't necessarily always the first one. I guess I wouldn't call you an early adopter. Like, it was like you needed to see something before you were going to integrate it into your system, or into your climbing methods. And I'm curious your thoughts on, like, partly just the progression of climbing, like, and how it, like, what how things changed, like how modernization or new tools and equipment changed your climbing, and then how you integrated them, and then where things are at now, like how you feel about the current, almost like it's just almost weekly or yearly, new things are coming out. So what was the first thing that really made you change how you climbed?
Well, at that time,
did you adopt
footlocking
and
was,
how do you feel things are going
the,
now in that direction?
The main way to be able to send up into a tree outside of body thrusting and getting up into the tree however you could. So that was one technique that I took away from once I got out of school and started actually working in the industry. And I had people around me that used those types of techniques, which was good because it just ended up evolving the way I climbed and the way I ascended into trees. And there's that time period kind of once I got out of school to probably 7 to 10 years, there was a lot of changes in the arboriculture industry. Like there was different harnesses, there was different methods to be able to get up. There was some single line stuff that was starting to come into play too. Not like it is today, but there was the beginnings of some of that style of climbing that was coming in. And it was pretty neat. It changed all the time, and trying to stay up and current with things. And again, I have to go back to the climbing competitions, being able to watch some of the top climbers at the international and the tricks they pulled out of their bags to be able to stand out and to be able to do different types of climbing styles. Again, it was taking pieces of those and watching somebody do it and then take it back and try and figure out what they did or how they did it. And it was pretty neat in that way, because that was really the only way you could differentiate yourself as one of those top climbers was in the masters, to be able to pull out some kind of neat things and to be able to give the crowd a little bit of a show on the ground as well too. But it really distinguished yourself with the judges. And I took those back, and when I competed in Ontario, every year I went back, I would use something that somebody used at the international masters to win my masters. So it was pretty neat, but we got to use some different things, and things changed a little bit, and it was nothing like it is now. It's crazy now. Like I'm so out of the loop now when it comes to some of the gear and some of the equipment. It amazes me. I was at the Ontario Climbing Competition back in September this year, or 2022, and just the amount of different gear and things there are, it's a lot more complex. It was a relatively simple time when I was doing it, and now it's a lot more complex, I would say. Which is good on one hand, but at the same time, on the other hand, you got to really pay attention to what you're doing. And obviously, I understand too that those are some more elite people. That's not everyday work ethics that a lot of people do, but it does definitely make your life a lot easier. Some of the new gear and equipment, and climbing.
What do you think as far as like new climbers, new people coming in? Like we're seeing a whole generation almost that doesn't know anything but SRS, and they don't even know how to climb MRS necessarily. Like there's that's happening sometimes. How do you, what's your thoughts on, like, if someone getting into it or someone learning the ropes, so to speak, like, is it all important? Is the old stuff as important?
My views on that right now would be the fact that
would be your thoughts
there's
on
a
that
gap
right now?
You need to understand how things work, and you need to go back to the basics and work back through them and get to a point where you're using some of the more advanced stuff. Now I think people jump in with a lot of the YouTube videos and different things like that. You can figure out how it works, but you may not understand how it works or why it works the way it works. And I think there's definitely a gap with the training aspect of it, in the sense that people don't know how to do anything other than what they have or are using at that point in time. Where back in the day, we would have choices. We could do it single line, we could do it dynamic, we could do static foot locking. There's different, you had different avenues, but you understood how each one of them worked. Where now I think it's more narrow. It's like, here's your setup, away you go, but you don't understand how you got there or even where you're going.
Right. Yeah, I think that is possibly happening for sure. It's an interesting topic because you could look at it from the perspective. It could be argued, I suppose, that well, why don't we go back and teach how to climb on a rope harness with Manila if we want to go right back to basics?
Sure.
When we talk about basics, we talk about it from the reference of our career. And when we started climbing, that's the basics. But, when we started climbing, the basics for the guys our age now was Manila rope and three-strand Manila or sizzle or even, just starting on one or two options of synthetic rope. So, it almost like the basics maybe is moving rope versus stationary rope. But, what's your view on
when
that,
you talk about where we were and where we started, but we were always taught the history, whether you were taught to actually how to use it, there was still that piece that was part of the history, and you understood the before and then the current and then the after, or where you could potentially go. So I think some of, and this is just my personal opinion, I think some of it is the fact that people just start in one section but don't remember. They start current and they don't remember how we got to the current process. But it was always there in the background, right? You always had that history. You always had that. I remember it was that climbing competition when we were in Alberta. And the Albertans, for some reason, I don't know, they wouldn't let the Easterners, they wouldn't let them climb the Masters. So they said, you did good today, but we're not going to let you climb the Masters, which was fine with me. I was okay with that. But I got to watch the Masters, and Frank Chips is one of his earlier climbs. And it just proves a point in the fact that he climbed up, got into the tree, and forgot his split tail on the ground. And he couldn't figure out how to be able to tie an inline knot to be able to do a taut line or a Blake hitch because he was missing that piece of equipment. And I think a lot of people, if they're missing that one piece of equipment, and everything comes to a standstill for them, and they just can't proceed. I think that's what I'm talking about, the history part of it, to be able to know how to get yourself out of situations. You know what? I did the same thing in my last time I won in 2011. I forgot my hitch on the ground, and I'm like, oh, now what I do? Well, I tied an inline Blake hitch, and away I went, and I still ended up winning. So it was a pretty neat aspect, and everybody knew it too. They knew I forgot it on the ground, but that's the difference between knowing and not knowing. And Frank wasn't at that point yet of knowing, and he was taught by great people, but they didn't give him kind of the history lesson behind it. No fault to Frank. He's an amazing climber. Love that dude.
Yeah, no, I remember that. I was at that competition, and I remember watching you tie in after you ascended in the Masters, and I'm looking at it, he's tying in conventional. What's he doing? And then I realized, oh, the bugger forgot his tail on the ground. It's in the bag. And you did not even skip a beat. You acted like you'd planned it all along, eh? And it was hilarious you just tied in like as if you planned the whole thing. And I'm thinking, look at that. There's Johnny just going like really old school, because nobody had done a Masters in a conventional closed dynamic system or closed moving rope system like that. There was a lot of people climbing on it. I think there still are maybe, but they weren't in the Masters necessarily. But yeah, it makes a good point. And I do remember that quite well. It was a real interesting turn of events. So, Johnny, just as far as, you know, training and your life in the trees, like, I mean, you've even moved on from it. So maybe like you've made the transition. Like you went from, like, you were an active trainer with us for what, 4 or 5 years, and then moved back kind of into the tree realm, into municipal, and now back into private. So how's that journey been? Like, cause you had quite a full career if you go back to the beginning. I mean, if I give a synopsis, I think you started at, like, a private company, you went to a training company, then you went to a municipality.
It's been a pretty full career,
and company.
You know what? I've been blessed with the individuals I've got to be with and hang out with, and be able to do things. But again, my entire career, even after training, was based on training. It was based on how you taught me, and how Rip and Ken and Thor and Norm and the other Norm, Tony, he was part of that too. Being able to work as groups and individuals, and to be able to be like-minded and positive thinking and outgoing. To me, it was, you know what, everybody asks you, like, you know what, have you had your perfect dream job? I said, I've already had my perfect dream job, and that was training. That I've had I'm full when it comes to being able to have my perfect dream job, and training was it. Now I had to move on to life and be able to do other things, to be able to support my family, and to be able to get more knowledge in different aspects. And it's funny how it comes right back around, because now, even at Davy Tree, where I'm working now, I've started doing more of some of the training stuff, because that was my background. That was my what I was very good at. I feel, anyways, through a lot of so that training aspect. It's good, and I'm back again a little bit. I'm doing some videos, and I'm working with trainers and being able to teach them how to speak in groups and stuff like that. Everything that you taught me, and it's amazing to be able to come back around to it and find that in a position where I didn't think I'd be able to have that joy again. So it's been pretty amazing. Like, each day is just a blessing on top of a blessing every time I go out. So, and really, it comes from a couple people in my life that we went down certain roads with. And like I said, Jim Deitch was one of them. And then my next one would be you, to be able to do the things that you did and teach me what you taught me. Because I was that quiet little kid. Like, anybody that knows me knows that I'm not an outgoing speaker, not like yourself. You're flamboyant all the time. Where I'm just as happy to sit in the back of the bar, have a beer by myself. But you taught me that the power to be able to speak and to be able to deliver things so that people could use that and take that away. That quiet person sitting in the back of the bar, nobody would ever listen to that person. But you, to be able to get me to find my voice, and the way you taught us how to teach and how to express ourselves, it was pretty amazing, and it was life-changing for me, for sure.
I remember the instructor intensive in Florida.
The second one. I think it was the second one, because I was scared as hell. And you know what? At that point in time, I was like, I'm done, man. Like, I'm not doing this, and I'm leaving. I was packing my bags, and I'm like, I'm out of here.
Yeah. I I know.
I don't know what made me stay,
So
but
what
I was
made you
definitely
stay?
I was on my way out. But I think that was where I really understood or started to understand the power that I could have if I changed how I did things to be more impactful to an individual, to get them to learn it better, how they learned, and understanding how people learn. And I still use it today. I did a seminar down at DITS down in Kent, Ohio, for the Davy Group. Just being able to present it, and they're like, "What? Why are you doing certain things?" And I
Awesome.
explained why make them raise their hands. I
That's
explained
awesome.
the fluctuations of your voices and being able to do all those different types of things, get them to stand up. I made them do a lasso. I made them do a cowboy. I made them all stand up
Wow.
and swing the lasso around because our presentation was 2 hours long, right? So it was like needed some breaks and stuff in between, and being able to do that, right? So it was pretty neat. So
Right.
it's definitely it, and how we did that, and how we all started to teach that way. It was amazing to go from how we were doing things early to how that impacted us as trainers when we started with Arborcan and with Neil Thiessen coming in and teaching us those types of things. It was pretty neat.
Those trainer sessions around 2008 and 2009 were really interesting because I think the timing was such that, we were sort of this interconnected group. I'd known you briefly, Johnny, and, Dwayne I'd known for a couple of years. But it brought us all together, and it really kind of, for me, and I think for a lot of people too, it took that disparate group of individuals and gave us kind of a single unified way to train, and it really, the ripples from that spread out, like a lot. And there's been a lot of people inside, outside the organization that, I'll go see a presentation now in arboriculture, and I watch them run the formula, that we were working on in 2008, 2009. And I know that ripple is carried out, but it was just a really interesting time right then. As a friend of Dwayne and ours, Amanda would say, universal timing. It was really, I wouldn't say we were all kind of wandering around lost in the wilderness, but we were all kind of just wandering around, sort of connected. Some of us were doing this, some of us were doing that. And we wanted to do better, but we didn't quite know how to do better. We were all pretty good technicians. We never lacked for skill, and that's not to pat ourselves in the back, but we were a pretty good group of arborists. We knew the work. What we didn't know is how to explain the work to other people very well. And then, once we got that, from that 2008, 2009, I think really kind of solidified it into almost a culture, I would say. It was really, really interesting how that worked out that way. And those bonds still exist to this day.
Yeah, it's so fun to have been a part of it, and continues to be, really, like there's the connections. There's several hundred people out there that have, had that experience, and that are still connected, and where friendships were forged, and careers connected, and that continue to this day. And that's really what it's all about. I really think that's why I use the analogy of the human forest. One of our young instructors, made the comment that he's a sapling growing up amongst some of the giants, so to speak. It was just an analogy made, but it really is, when you think about it, it's like that in the cycle of life that does exist, and even the fallen timber that is giving back to our forest floor, and how our roots connect, and they're like our experiences and our knowledge. And if we have the willingness to share, and we make fertile ground and create the environment that allows for those connections to happen, we all will flourish, and we can share that energy and strength. And that's basically what I mean when I'm talking about the human forest, and what kind of the whole concept of this podcast was to just listen to people talk about those connections and those experiences, and share, just continue the web of connection through this medium. So it's just really exciting and cool to be a part of it. And Johnny, what would be, if the kind of the key things, like some that, like, that really stand out for you as far as connections that were made and that made a real impact on you in the human forest and your time being part of the human forest?
Well, it goes back to just what you were talking about, like knowing that I had a little hand in part of the beginning, and to be able to touch as many people as I've been able to interact with, and to be able to share information, stories, and get connected. It's amazing. You still see people nowadays every once in a while, and it's like, oh, remember this? And you go back to those stories, and you go back to those moments in time, and it's simply amazing. Like, I all I can say for myself is that I'm I'm at a point where, you know what, every day is just whipped cream on top of the sundae.
What would be your highlights for how the human forest has impacted your life?
It affected it through my entire career. Like, it was knowing that I had a small part in some of the beginning of the training, and being able to touch people's lives in different ways. And the amount of people, when you go back to think about how many people I've taught over the last 20 years, I tried to go back and figure it out one time, and it was just too many. It was well over 20,000 people that I've probably connected with in the arboriculture industry through either Humber College or through training with NATS, training with Arboriculture Canada, training with Arbor Master. It's amazing how those connections happen, and I've got a number of friends that I know that if I needed a place to stay and I was somewhere close to them, you know what, they'd open their door to me no different than I would to them if they were in my hometown, right? So those connections are just, they're always there. Doesn't matter how long you've been out of the scene, doesn't matter how long you haven't been training, those connections last forever. And no different than tree roots connecting with one another, different trees under the ground, and taking substance from everybody. It just continues to grow.
Johnny, you're talking about how it's affected your life or your career, but what about personally, like even family life and, like just in general on that, like from your personal side of things, do you feel there's been an impact there also?
Well, I believe that the people that impact my life, the people I let into my life, impacted it the most. And the people that I allowed into my life were positive people and goal oriented in the same direction as myself. And yeah, it overflows into my everyday life, like how I get up in the morning, how positive I am. And you know what? This is going to be a good day. Like it's no different. And I believe that's from the people that I've had in my life and directed me in the way that I went personally and professionally.
Yeah. Interesting. I agree. There is a lot of connection to, and we don't think, maybe it's part of getting older and so on, but I think more these days about how I'm living and how, the choices I've made in life have go on to affect me now. And, even I guess the symbolism of trees, and how there's almost lessons in the trees themselves and in how trees grow and how forests are and how to live our own life. Like one example for me is just trees respond slowly to stimulus. That's one example right there, that I can take from trees that's a good one. Like, don't react so quickly to things that stimulate me or cause me to respond, but is there any way that you, I remember one time, and I just thought of this, but you made a reference to when you think of you, or it was something when, do you remember that? Talking about, when, if we don't see it for a long time, or even, long after you pass, the way to remember you by.
No, like, what were we talking about? We were talking about...
Well, you're getting back to this, the hard thing to talk about in this industry, with fatalities and passing away. And, and when I go, guys, it was a touching moment. Like, we were having a meaningful talk about the hard stuff. And, do you remember that?
No, I don't. Sorry.
That's okay. It was something to the effect about, when you look at the trees, or when you can think of me, but it was something that we're...
Well, I guess I've never believed in headstones or gravestones or anything like that. I always believed in auras and people and living things. So, you know what? When I'm gone, and I hope people will still remember me as far as what I did and how I did things, and just in the sense that, I tried to be the best person I could every single day that I walked on this earth. And you know what? If you want to talk to me, you don't need to go talk to a stone. You can look up in the sky and talk to the stars. You can look at the trees and the wind blowing through your hair. I'm there. So I'm always there. Always will be there.
Right. I'd like to just, it hasn't come up yet, I don't think, Tony, with anyone else yet in the podcast series, but I know that you and Bruce were really close, and not only like you and Bruce, but then your wives became close, Lita and Yvonne, and maybe we could finish off our time together here for this particular podcast, and we'd be happy to do another. How do you feel that, Bruce, he was a giant in the forest. He was a tall tree. He's fallen now, his tree, but he's still very much a part of the forest floor, part of our forest, part of what's feeding us all still. And maybe, how is there that example of your connection to him personally and professionally, how that's carries over for you today?
Well, professionally, you know what? Bruce Smith is, I still think about him a lot. Anytime I'm in Florida, I go and visit him. And the trees that we worked in and worked around, be able to reconnect, I guess you could say. Haven't been in a while, need to go again. But at the end of the day, again, it's just, I go back to that positive individual and the choices and the people I choose to be around. He was one of them as well, too. And he was, no matter through everything that he was going through, personally and professionally, he was just always a positive person. And we went through some stuff with him, and now he's helping the younger generation in the forest grow tall and strong.
Yeah, I think of Bruce often too, Johnny. Like, oftentimes I find myself doing the old "What would Bruce do?" situation. You find yourself like, "Oh my, what would Bruce do here?" And I think of him often, and it's cool. I miss having him around, but I also realize that he's still here, and just some of his. I mean, every time I step up, and before a group of people to speak, I think of so many lessons that Bruce taught me at Trainer, and then later on just working with him doing training and stuff, and they're all just so valuable. Just like I said, just a giant. And then he really started the idea, gave us the terminology of the ripples and how life travels through and stuff. And it was I've written whole series, short stories and things based on those ideas and stuff. So
yeah, you've talked about it a couple of times through the podcast and the ripples, and the day Bruce brought that out to us as a group, it just hit everybody like square in the forehead and just went, "Oh yeah, now I get it." And and the power and the impact of the ripples. And it's just been amazing to be able to see the impact and how people grow through those impacts of each individual, not necessarily myself, but everybody that was on the team, and how those things just kept cascading and kept getting better and changing. Like that's such an amazing part of it as well too. It's like, you know what, I'm not doing this anymore, but the foundation that I helped lay just helped so many more people and the industry itself, and hopefully personally and professionally at the end of the day. But the ripples, it's the ripples that make that happen.
Yeah. Shortly after Bruce passed on, I thought maybe that, it was something had passed on with him. But I now know that the ripples are still there. They're just a little harder to see and hear, I think, because of all the static from social media and all that stuff that happens. There's more trainers in the arboriculture industry than ever. Some really good, some, doing okay, but I think the ripples are still there. You just have to listen for them a little harder. I think, look a little harder. I think they used to be a little more obvious because there wasn't as much, static, but they're still there. They're still very much there. And they pop up at unsuspected times.